Grand Ole Opry legend Stringbean Akeman and his wife were murdered in their home back in 1973.
He stood barely over 5 feet tall, always wore suspenders and a grin, and made America laugh every Saturday night. David Stringbean Akeman wasn't just a banjo-picking comedian, he was a cornerstone of early country entertainment. From his legendary performances on the Grand Ole Opry to his unforgettable presence on Hee Haw, Stringbean became an icon. The oversized pants, the quick wit, the blazing banjo licks. He was beloved not just for his talent, but for his authenticity. Yet behind that folksy charm was a man shaped by hardship. Raised in rural Kentucky, molded by the Great Depression, Stringbean trusted few and kept his life and his savings close to the chest. That caution, however, may have painted a target on his back. In 1973, the unthinkable happened. Stringbean and his wife Estelle were found murdered inside their modest Tennessee cabin. The country music world was shattered, and an investigation quickly pointed to 2 men. Arrests were made. Trials followed. Justice, it seemed, was served, but the questions never truly stopped. How did the killers know when Stringbean would return home that night? Why was the cabin ransacked, yet most of the money left untouched? And most haunting of all, was there someone else involved who never faced justice? For years, theories swirled. Clues surfaced. Fans speculated. Some believed it was a simple robbery gone wrong. Others insisted there was more. Something deeper and darker hiding behind the crime scene tape. And now, after decades of mystery, we finally have the answer. The truth about what really happened that night in the hills of Ridgetop has come to light. And by the end of this video, the mystery of Stringbean's murder will finally be solved. By the early 1970s, Stringbean was more than just a comedic fixture. He was a living legend in country music and television. Every week, viewers across America tuned in to see him crack jokes and play banjo on Hee Haw, bringing his Appalachian wit and musical brilliance to homes nationwide. But for all his fame, Stringbean never changed. He still lived like a man from the hills. No fancy car, no lavish home, just a modest log cabin tucked away in rural Tennessee. While other stars bought mansions and dined at country clubs, Stringbean and his wife Estelle kept chickens, chopped firewood, and cooked simple meals. His approach to money was just as old-fashioned. Born during the Great Depression, Stringbean had seen banks fail and families lose everything. He didn't trust financial institutions. Instead, he was known to carry large sums of cash on him and stash money in various places throughout their cabin. Rumors swirled among locals and musicians alike. Stringbean didn't use banks. He hid his fortune in the walls of his house, under floorboards, even behind picture frames. Whether true or exaggerated, those rumors spread fast, and some people began to see opportunity. Despite his wealth and popularity, Stringbean remained wary of strangers. He'd once been robbed while on the road, an experience that left him even more cautious. He and Estelle rarely entertained visitors, kept their circle tight, and stuck to a routine that never changed. On Saturday nights, they'd perform at the Opry, then drive home to their secluded cabin. That routine gave them comfort, but it also made them predictable, and that predictability was what made them vulnerable. What few people knew at the time was that someone had been watching, waiting, listening. While Stringbean's jokes made the nation smile, someone in his orbit was plotting something dark. The whispers about hidden cash, the isolated home, the lack of security. It all added up to temptation too strong for some to resist. Stringbean and Estelle had worked their whole lives to build something honest, something peaceful. But the very things that made them safe in their own eyes, modesty, routine, and trust, would soon be the reasons their lives were stolen. And on one quiet November night, those dangers would come crashing through their front door. On the night of November 10th, 1973, Stringbean performed as usual at the Grand Ole Opry. Those who saw him said he was in good spirits, joking with fellow performers backstage, playing his banjo with signature flair. Estelle was with him, smiling and supportive, as always. After the show, the couple said their goodbyes, got into their modest car, and made the familiar drive back to their rural home in Ridgetop, Tennessee. It was a route they had taken hundreds of times before. But that night, something was different. Unbeknownst to them, two men were already inside their cabin, waiting in the darkness. John Brown and his cousin Marvin Brown were petty criminals with a history of theft. They had heard the same rumors that circulated around Nashville, that Stringbean kept thousands in cash hidden around his home. The Browns saw it as an easy score. They knew Stringbean's schedule. They knew he would be away on Saturday night. So they broke into the house, ransacked it looking for money, and waited for the couple to return. When Stringbean and Estelle arrived home shortly after midnight, they were greeted not by silence, but by terror. The exact events inside the cabin are still debated, but what is known is horrifying. Stringbean walked in first and was immediately shot and killed near the doorway. Estelle, hearing the commotion, ran from the car toward the cabin only to be gunned down outside, trying to escape or help her husband. She was found the next morning lying face down near the driveway, her purse still in her hand. The news rocked Nashville and the country music world. Fans couldn't believe that the gentle, funny man they welcomed into their homes each week had been murdered in cold blood. Fellow musicians were devastated. The country music community had always been close-knit, and the loss of Stringbean and Estelle felt personal to everyone. Authorities arrived quickly and were stunned by what they found. The house had been torn apart, but ironically, the thieves had missed most of the cash that Stringbean had hidden. In fact, thousands of dollars were later discovered stashed behind a brick chimney and tucked away in walls. The killers had gained nothing but blood on their hands and a trail that would soon lead right to them. As the community mourned, a deeper fear began to take root. If someone as beloved and low-profile as Stringbean could be targeted, who was truly safe? The Browns had taken more than 2 lives. They had stolen a sense of peace from Nashville itself. The arrest came quickly. Within days of the murders, police zeroed in on their suspects, John A. Brown and his cousin Marvin. It didn't take long. The Browns had criminal records and had been seen bragging about newfound cash in the aftermath of the killings. Their connection to the area and their sudden access to money raised immediate red flags. John Brown was arrested first. He maintained his innocence at first, but quickly cracked under questioning, spinning a story riddled with inconsistencies. When brought to trial, the details of the crime were laid bare, and they were as disturbing as they were senseless. Prosecutors argued that the murders were not just acts of greed, but of cold calculation. The Browns had come prepared. They had brought weapons. They had waited in silence for hours. They had no intention of leaving witnesses. The trial gripped the public, fans of Stringbean, friends in the music industry, and everyday citizens filled the courtroom, hoping for justice. What emerged was a tragic tale of how envy and desperation had intersected with innocence and routine. The Browns didn't just kill, they shattered a legacy. A man who had risen from Appalachian poverty to become one of America's most cherished entertainers had been gunned down for a rumor about hidden money. John Brown was sentenced to 198 years in prison. His cousin Marvin, who played a smaller role in the crime and turned state's witness, received a lesser sentence. For a while, it seemed like justice had been served, but time would complicate that sense of closure. Decades passed. In 2014, after serving more than 40 years in prison, John Brown was granted parole. The decision sparked outrage in the country music community. Friends of Stringbean, including fellow Hee Haw cast members and Opry veterans, publicly condemned the release. How could a man who carried out such a brutal and calculated murder walk free? To many, it felt like justice had been reversed. Brown may have served time, but to those who knew Stringbean, no sentence could ever match the depth of the loss. His release was a grim reminder that legal justice and moral justice don't always align. Even worse, the parole hearing revealed something chilling. Brown had never shown remorse. He maintained a vague story, avoided direct admissions of guilt, and gave no comfort to the families left behind. For fans and loved ones, it wasn't just about punishment. It was about the lack of accountability. The man who took Stringbean's life never fully gave that life back. Not in truth, not in sorrow, not even in words. After the murders, attention shifted to what Stringbean and Estelle had left behind. And it was more complicated than anyone imagined. Despite his fame and long-standing presence on shows like Hee Haw and the Grand Ole Opry, Stringbean was notoriously frugal. He distrusted banks, having grown up during the Great Depression, and he often kept large sums of money hidden in his home. This habit, as it turned out, became a fatal vulnerability. When authorities searched the Akeman cabin after the murders, they discovered thousands of dollars in cash stashed in odd places, behind bricks, inside walls, even under floorboards. Some estimates suggest Stringbean had nearly $20,000 in the house at the time, a fortune in 1973, especially considering his modest way of life. But there was no will, no clear direction for what would happen to his estate. The tragedy wasn't just emotional, it became a logistical and financial mess. Estelle's relatives inherited most of the estate, though it was far from simple. Lawsuits followed. Rumors of additional hidden money persisted for years. Treasure hunters even broke into the old cabin long after the murders, convinced that more cash was still hidden away. The house, once a quiet home tucked in the Tennessee hills, became a symbol of both Stringbean's paranoia and the strange magnetism his murder created. Then there were the more personal losses. Stringbean and Estelle had no children. Their closest relatives tried to handle affairs quietly, but the spotlight was impossible to avoid. The tragedy had become folklore, and everything, down to the land itself, seemed cursed by what had happened. Friends in the country music world tried to help. Roy Acuff, Minnie Pearl, Grandpa Jones, they all spoke publicly about Stringbean, raising awareness and pushing for tighter community safety. Some even campaigned for security upgrades at the Grand Ole Opry and better protection for artists who still lived simply, but none of it brought peace. The financial mystery surrounding Stringbean became part of his legend, a man who didn't trust banks, who lived humbly despite success, who was murdered for money the killers couldn't even find. It was a cruel irony, and one that overshadowed his music, his humor, and the life he had built with Estelle. For many, the unanswered questions about his finances were just another reminder of how much was taken when he was killed. In the years that followed Stringbean's murder, the country music community struggled to make sense of the loss. For those who knew him personally, it was more than just the death of a colleague. It was the brutal end of an era defined by humility, kindness, and small-town decency. The tragedy hit especially hard because it didn't just take Stringbean and Estelle. It shattered the illusion that the country stars of the Opry were safe, tucked away from the dangers of the outside world. Many close to Stringbean described him as a gentle soul, always quick with a joke, and rarely seen without his banjo. Despite his growing fame on Hee Haw and decades on the Grand Ole Opry stage, he never acted like a celebrity. He still grew vegetables in his backyard, hunted squirrels, and attended local church events. He lived like a man stuck in time, in the best possible way. Grandpa Jones, one of Stringbean's closest friends and co-stars, was the one who found their bodies. The memory haunted him for the rest of his life. In interviews, He would often choke up when recalling that night. His grief became a visible scar, one that never truly healed. Other friends in the industry, including Minnie Pearl and Roy Clark, echoed similar sentiments. The loss wasn't just tragic, it felt personal. But even in mourning, Stringbean's legacy endured. His style, both musically and comedically, was unique. He blended humor with old-time Appalachian banjo playing, creating a character that felt both cartoonish and deeply human. Younger generations of bluegrass and country musicians cite him as an influence, especially for his ability to connect with audiences through warmth and sincerity. In 2001, the Country Music Hall of Fame honored Stringbean's contribution to the genre with a special exhibit, showcasing his banjo, his costumes, and photos from his early days with Bill Monroe. It was a rare and long overdue recognition of a man who had done so much to shape the tone and culture of country entertainment. The tribute was emotional, a quiet reminder that while Stringbean's life ended in violence, his music and spirit still echoed in the halls of Nashville. But even as the tributes poured in and the years passed, a quiet unease lingered. Something about the whole case never felt fully resolved. The arrests had been made, a man served his time, but the pain never really faded. The questions never fully stopped, and the sense of loss, that something precious had been stolen from the heart of country music, remained just beneath the surface. The conviction of John and Marvin Douglas changed everything, and nothing. In 1973, just weeks after the murders, police arrested the cousins, both with a history of petty crime and local trouble. The investigation revealed that the Douglases had heard rumors of Stringbean's hidden cash, a well-known secret among locals. They believed the reclusive star kept tens of thousands of dollars in his modest cabin, stashed away in coffee cans, beneath floorboards, even hidden inside the walls. To them, it sounded like easy money. But it wasn't. When they broke into the Akeman home, they didn't find what they expected. According to court testimony, they waited in ambush for Stringbean and Estelle to return from the Opry. The confrontation was fast and fatal. Stringbean was shot just outside the front door. Estelle, terrified and trying to flee, was gunned down near the back of the house. The killers left with barely any money, reportedly less than $200, and a few personal items. It was a senseless crime with nothing to show for it but devastation. At trial, the evidence was overwhelming. A witness tied the suspects to the crime scene, and stolen items were recovered from their possession. The jury wasted little time. John Brown was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Marvin was also convicted but died in prison years later. Justice, it seemed, had been served. And yet, for many in the community, the case never sat quite right. Why didn't they find more money? Was someone else involved who was never caught? Had the Douglases acted alone? Or were they manipulated by someone else with deeper knowledge of Stringbean's habits? Even decades later, these questions persist. In a shocking development in 2014, after serving more than 40 years behind bars, John Brown was released on parole. His release sparked outrage from many in Nashville and beyond. Grandpa Jones's family and others who were close to Stringbean publicly condemned the decision. To them, the murder wasn't just old news. It was a fresh wound that never fully healed. John Brown maintained his remorse, stating he had found God in prison and was no longer the same man. But no apology, no amount of regret could undo what had happened on that cold November night in 1973. Stringbean and Estelle were gone. Their lives had been taken for nothing, and the pain they left behind was immeasurable. For fans and loved ones, the Douglases weren't just criminals. They were symbols of a world that had become colder, more dangerous, less trusting. And their names, forever tied to one of country music's most tragic chapters, remain etched in a legacy of violence and loss. Despite the heartbreak, life moved on in Nashville. But something had changed. The murder of Stringbean and Estelle Akeman shook the country music community to its core. Stars who once left their doors unlocked and mingled freely with fans began to retreat behind fences, install alarm systems, and rethink their sense of safety. In many ways, the innocence of an era died with Stringbean. But as years turned into decades, a curious myth began to build around the man and the money he never trusted banks with. You see, even after the murder and the trial, rumors never stopped circulating that Stringbean had stashed away thousands of dollars somewhere on his property. Some said it was in his mattress. Others swore it was buried in jars across his land. In the months following his death, treasure hunters prowled the grounds, digging near trees, tearing up floorboards, and even searching the walls of the Akeman home. Most came away with nothing, but then something changed. In 1996, more than 20 years after the murder, workers renovating Stringbean's former cabin discovered over $20,000 in cash. The bills were so old and damaged that most were no longer usable. They'd been hidden so well that even investigators in 1973 missed them. This shocking discovery reignited public interest in the case and confirmed what many had always suspected. Stringbean's fear of banks wasn't just a quirk, it was a lifestyle. The find raised new questions. Had the killers known exactly where the money was? Or were they simply grasping at rumors, too impatient and reckless to locate the true stash? Did someone else know where more was hidden and take it before police arrived? Was there more money still buried somewhere? These questions became part of the Stringbean legend, one laced with music, laughter, and tragedy. The cabin where he and Estelle lived, once a quiet place of retreat, became a kind of haunted shrine. Some fans made pilgrimages there, leaving flowers or notes. Others just came to reflect. The Grand Ole Opry, too, kept his spirit alive. His banjo remained on display for years, and tribute performances were held in his memory. For many, the loss of Stringbean wasn't just personal. It represented the vulnerability of good people in a changing world. His story reminded fans that fame doesn't protect you, kindness doesn't shield you, and the quiet life isn't always safe. But it also reminded them of something else. That legacy is about more than how you die. It's about how you live. And Stringbean Akeman lived a life filled with joy, humility, laughter, and music that still echoes in the hearts of those who remember. In the end, the story of David Stringbean Akeman is a uniquely American tragedy. One part country folklore, one part cautionary tale, wrapped in a mystery that, to this day, refuses to fully die. At the time of his murder in 1973, Stringbean was enjoying the kind of late career success most musicians only dream of. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't a chart topper, but he was beloved. Every Saturday night, his presence on Hee Haw brought laughter into millions of living rooms. His music, with that distinct banjo twang, carried the essence of old-time Appalachia, humble, raw, and honest. And his marriage to Estelle was one of quiet loyalty, the kind of love story that rarely made headlines, but meant everything to those who knew them. Yet beneath all the success, there were signs of a man deeply cautious. He'd lived through the Great Depression and never fully trusted banks. He carried his earnings in his overalls, buried his savings in the yard, and built his modest life around security and routine. Ironically, it was this very mistrust that may have sealed his fate. The whispers about his hidden fortune made their way into the wrong ears. And two cousins, fueled by greed and desperation, shattered everything. The aftermath of the killings left the Akeman family, friends and fans gutted. Nashville mourned like it had lost one of its own blood. At the funeral, Roy Acuff reportedly broke down in tears. Grandpa Jones, who discovered the bodies and testified in court, was never the same. The loss haunted him. The laughter Stringbean brought to so many left a deafening silence in its absence. Estelle, often forgotten in the shadow of her husband's fame, was more than just a victim. She was Stringbean's anchor, a woman who stood by him through years of struggle and success. Her murder added another layer of cruelty to an already senseless act. The fact that they died together, trying to protect one another, has always haunted those close to the case. Their deaths weren't just tragic, they were symbolic. The death of a certain kind of America, trusting, gentle, close-knit. Financially, Stringbean wasn't rich by celebrity standards. He had no mansions, no flashy cars, no bodyguards. His home was a small, two-room cabin in Ridgetop, Tennessee. Modest, practical, humble. That was Stringbean. But the irony is, he may have died far wealthier than anyone realized. The decades of rumors, partially confirmed by the 1996 discovery of hidden cash, suggest there could have been thousands more stashed around his property, money that likely went undiscovered or decomposed over time. He had no children. His only heirs were distant relatives and friends who knew him well. His estate was modest, his belongings simple. But his legacy? That's immeasurable. In an industry where egos often outweigh talent, Stringbean was a rare soul, genuine, kind, funny, and content to play the background. And that made him unforgettable. Today, his memory lives on in bits and pieces. Old recordings, grainy Hee Haw reruns, a banjo solo that still makes someone smile. His name might not be in the Country Music Hall of Fame, but in the hearts of those who understand the roots of country music, Stringbean is royalty. His murder remains one of the darkest stains on country music's golden era. But his life, that shines brighter. As for the mystery? Officially, it's considered solved. The men who killed him were convicted. One died in prison. The other, John Brown, was paroled in 2014. A decision met with outrage and disbelief. But many believe there's more to the story. Whispers of a third man. Questions about how the killers knew so much about Stringbean's habits. And of course, the unanswered question that may never be resolved. Was it really just about money? The deeper truth is this: Stringbean's murder wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. It was a moment that broke the illusion that country music stars lived in a world apart, safe from the chaos of the outside world. It shattered a community, scarred its storytellers, and changed the way stars protected themselves forever. But Stringbean wouldn't want to be remembered for how he died. He'd want to be remembered for how he made people laugh, how he made them sing, and how he made them feel like maybe, just maybe, life didn't need to be so complicated. And in the final measure, maybe that's the real ending to the Stringbean mystery. He didn't need millions, fame, or mansions to leave his mark. He just needed a banjo, a smile, and a heart full of music.